The ship hung silently in the shadow of Earth, its sleek surface reflecting the pale glow of the moon. Inside, a cold, sterile chamber buzzed faintly with the hum of alien technology. Commander Varkson stood at the helm, his elongated figure casting an imposing silhouette under the pale light of the consoles. His translucent skin shimmered faintly, revealing the pulsating veins beneath, a living map of his unyielding resolve. His eyes, multifaceted and iridescent, focused on the blue planet below with a mix of curiosity and disdain. "Humans," he muttered, his voice resonating in low, layered tones. "The most unpredictable anomaly in the universe." Behind him, Lieutenant Zoc approached, his movements fluid but hesitant. Zoc, younger and less battle-worn, carried an air of skepticism that often irritated Varkson. His own translucent frame appeared almost fragile in the harsh light of the command chamber, yet his gaze was steady. "Commander, forgive my doubt, but are we not wasting resources on this? They are primitive creatures driven by emotion, hardly a threat to species like ours." Varkson turned, his expression unreadable, but his voice sharp. "Emotion is not their weakness, Lieutenant. It is their weapon. Do not mistake simplicity for safety. Humans have survived their own chaos for millennia, adapting to catastrophes they themselves create. They are anomalous." The chamber darkened as a massive screen descended from the ceiling. Images flickered to life, a montage of humanity's most harrowing moments. War-torn landscapes, cities reduced to ash, the haunting eyes of children in the aftermath of destruction. The footage shifted, showing humans laughing, singing, rebuilding. "They endure," Varkson said, his voice almost reverent, "and they evolve." Zoc frowned, his pale fingers tracing the edge of a console. "But at what cost? Their history is a litany of violence and self-destruction. Surely this is evidence of their inferiority." Varkson's gaze remained fixed on the screen. Inferiority does not explain survival against such odds. There is something deeper at play, something we do not yet understand. The silence between them was broken by a sharp chime. The ship's AI, a monotone voice devoid of inflection, announced, "Reconnaissance protocols are complete. Infiltration units are prepared for deployment." "Good," Varkson said. "Initiate the sequence. We will observe them firsthand." Moments later, Varkson and Zoc descended to Earth in cloaked pods, their forms shifting subtly to mimic human physiology. They landed in what humans called a city, though to the aliens, it appeared as a chaotic sprawl of lights, sounds, and shadow. The air was heavy with smog and tension, the streets littered with debris that whispered of recent unrest. Varkson moved with deliberate precision, his disguised form tall and imposing. Zoc followed, his eyes scanning their surroundings with growing unease. The city seemed alive, its very essence pulsating with an unspoken threat. They passed groups of humans huddled around makeshift fires, their voices low and guarded. The aliens could sense the undercurrent of fear woven into their every word. As they walked, a sudden commotion drew their attention. A man, ragged and desperate, darted from the shadows, clutching a small, battered bag. Behind him, another figure emerged, a towering man with a face carved in fury. The pursuit was brutal and swift, ending in an alley where the thief was cornered. Varkson and Zoc observed from the shadows as the larger man delivered a savage beating, his fists raining down with merciless precision. The thief's cries echoed off the walls, mingling with the wet sound of impact. Finally, the larger man seized the bag and disappeared into the night, leaving the broken figure crumpled on the ground. "Barbaric," Zoc whispered, his voice barely audible. They turned on each other without hesitation. "Survival," Varkson replied, a harsh teacher. They moved on, their path taking them to a dilapidated building where flickering neon lights announced a human gathering place. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with smoke and tension. Men sat around battered tables, their faces etched with exhaustion and suspicion. A crude game was being played, cards slapped down with forceful intent. The stakes appeared small, scraps of food, tarnished coins, but the intensity was palpable. Varkson and Zoc watched as a dispute erupted. Voices rose, fists clenched, and within moments, the room descended into chaos. Chairs were overturned, glasses shattered, and blood was spilled. The aliens stood unnoticed in the corner, their disguises shielding them from scrutiny. "Do you see, Lieutenant?" Varkson said quietly. "They thrive in disorder. Even their games are battlegrounds." Zoc's discomfort deepened, and yet they find joy in it. "Look at them. Some are still laughing, even as they bleed." Varkson said nothing, his gaze fixed on a man sitting apart from the fray. This one was different. His eyes were sharp, calculating, and his expression betrayed no emotion. He observed the chaos with a detached curiosity that mirrored Varkson's own. When the violence subsided, the man rose and left, his movements purposeful and unhurried. "Follow him," Varkson ordered. They trailed the man through the winding streets, their steps silent and measured. He led them to a secluded area where the city's noise faded into an eerie stillness. The man entered a small, decrepit building, and the aliens hesitated before following. Inside, the air was heavy with decay. The walls were lined with objects that Varkson could only describe as trophies, photographs, trinkets, and items stained with what appeared to be blood. The man sat at a rickety table, meticulously sharpening a blade. His movements were methodical, almost ritualistic. Varkson felt an unfamiliar sensation, a tightening in his chest, a cold knot of unease. "This one," he murmured, "is unlike the others." Zoc's voice was strained. "He is calculating, predatory." The man suddenly turned, his gaze locking onto the corner where they stood. For a moment, it seemed he could see through their disguises, his eyes piercing and unrelenting. A slow smile spread across his face, and he whispered something inaudible before returning to his blade. Varkson and Zoc left the building in silence, their minds racing. The city loomed around them, its darkness now feeling alive, its shadows pregnant with unseen horrors. As they ascended back to their ship, Zoc finally spoke, his voice tinged with dread. "Commander, what did he say?" Varkson's expression was unreadable, but his voice was steady. He said, "I knew you'd come." The ship's door sealed behind them with a hiss, and the earth shrank in the viewport. Varkson stood silently, his mind turning over what they had witnessed. Humans were more than unpredictable. They were something else entirely, something far more dangerous. Unanswered questions. Varkson stood at the observation deck, the planet turning slowly beneath him. His mind churned with images of the man from the shadows, the one who had seen them, or seemed to, and smiled. No creature should have been able to pierce their cloaking, yet something in the man's eyes had cut through their deception with terrifying clarity. A human smile should have been a benign expression, yet there had been nothing benign in it. That smile had been a promise, a warning. Behind him, Zoc approached, his posture tense and his words brittle. "Commander, this mission is veering beyond our parameters. We were sent to observe. What we are witnessing is something else entirely." Varkson didn't turn, his gaze fixed on the planet's surface. "You are afraid, Lieutenant." Zoc hesitated, then drew himself up, his translucent skin dimming in shame. "I fear the unknown, yes, but there is no dishonor in acknowledging it. What we saw in that man's lair, it was beyond understanding. His trophies, the meticulous way he honed his blade, that was not survival. It was pleasure in death. Humans take pride in what they create," Varkson said, his voice low. "Tools, machines, weapons, stories. They create horror as easily as they create beauty. But what makes them terrifying, Zoc, is that they do not see a difference. They weave nightmares into their existence as naturally as they breathe." A cold shiver passed through Zoc. Why? Why would any sentient species craft fear into its own mind? Varkson finally turned, his multifaceted eyes reflecting countless images of humanity's cruelty. Because fear is their teacher. They do not merely endure it, they master it. They make it into something they can wield. The room darkened as the holographic projector flickered to life. Footage from their Earth reconnaissance replayed across the walls. A human child sat alone in a dimly lit room, wide eyes fixed on a screen. A scene of terror unfolded, a story of ghosts, shadows, and unspeakable horrors. The child trembled, clutched a blanket tighter, but never looked away. Entertainment, Zoc whispered in disbelief. They choose this. Varkson's mandibles clicked in a rare gesture of agitation. They feed on it. They teach themselves to fear for pleasure. They shape their dreams into monsters, and then pay to be haunted by them. What kind of mind invites torment into its sanctuary of thought? The question hung unanswered as the footage shifted again. A documentary now, depicting the crimes of a human known as a serial killer. The screen filled with stark, grainy footage of dark alleys, blood-streaked walls, and chilling testimonies of calculated murder. The killer, when interviewed, spoke calmly. He described his actions with meticulous detail, his tone devoid of remorse. His eyes, so disturbingly human, remained as cold and empty as the void between stars. Varkson felt something twist inside him. He spoke of his victims as objects. He gave them numbers. He turned lives into equations. Numbers can be managed, Zoc said, his voice brittle. Feelings cannot. Perhaps this is how they cope, with distance, with detachment. Perhaps. Varkson's voice was distant, troubled. But coping is for those who suffer. He reveled in it. He enjoyed the power to unmake another being. Zoc swallowed the rising dread in his throat. We have seen brutality before, Commander. Countless species use violence as a tool. What makes humans different? Varkson's gaze darkened. Other species kill to survive, to protect, or to conquer. Humans kill for all those reasons, and for none at all. They invent reasons where there are none. They find meaning in destruction and call it justice, call it revenge. They romanticize it, glorify it, build monuments to it. It is not the act of killing that defines them. It is their endless capacity to justify it. The words pressed against Zoc like a weight, squeezing the breath from his chest. He felt the creeping realization of something far more insidious than physical danger. Humans did not need claws or venom. Their weapon was their mind, chaotic, brilliant, and terrifyingly adaptable. The ship jolted as a sensor alarm blared through the chamber. Zoc turned to the console, his fingers moving swiftly across the controls. Commander, there's activity on the surface. A lone human approaching a group of others, armed, but not aligned. It appears to be a confrontation. Varkson's mandibles tightened. Bring it up. The screen displayed a narrow alley bathed in flickering orange light. A lone figure, thin, wiry, but carrying himself with calm confidence, walked toward a cluster of men brandishing crude weapons. The tension was immediate, palpable. The leader of the group snarled a threat, stepping forward with a metal pipe in hand. The lone figure did not flinch. His hands remained at his sides, his posture relaxed. He spoke a single sentence, too quiet for the audio to capture. The group leader's expression faltered. He hesitated, then lunged forward. It happened in a blur, fluid, precise, and brutal. The lone man sidestepped the attack, grabbed the leader's wrist, and twisted. A sickening snap echoed through the alley. The weapon clattered to the ground. The others froze as the lone figure spoke again, his voice calm but heavy with authority. Fear rippled through them like a tangible force. One by one, they retreated into the shadows, leaving their fallen leader groaning in pain. Zoc stared, his chest tight. He didn't kill him. No, Varkson said. He didn't need to. Then what did he do? Varkson's gaze lingered on the screen, where the lone man adjusted his collar and disappeared into the night. He let them know he could. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the hum of the ship's systems. Varkson felt the weight of his own words settle into the marrow of his bones. Humans did not merely conquer with strength. They wielded fear as deftly as a blade, carving it into their enemies and their own kind alike. Fear was a tool, a weapon, and a currency. Varkson turned away from the screen, the shadows of Earth still reflected in his many eyes. We came to learn what makes them dangerous. Now we know. And? Zoc asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Varkson's response was a grim whisper of certainty. We've only begun to understand the depths of it. The corridors of the ship stretched endlessly into silence, the hum of its engines a faint murmur beneath the weight of unspoken thoughts. Varkson paced with measured steps, his mind churning. His multifaceted eyes reflected the dim lights overhead as he replayed the encounter in the alley. Every movement, every word the lone human had uttered, carried layers of meaning far beyond the violence he had so effortlessly avoided. There was a power in restraint that Varkson could not ignore, a mastery over fear that defied the instincts of survival alone. Enough. What further purpose can this mission serve? We know what they are capable of. You think we have reached the limits of their nature. Varkson's voice was calm, but beneath it simmered a tension, like a blade, on the verge of striking. We have seen only fragments of their truth. The most dangerous knowledge lies deeper still. Zoc hesitated before responding, his words measured. If you seek to understand their darkness, it may consume us. They wield it not as an accident, but as an art. How much further can we go before it touches us as well? Varkson paused, his gaze distant. Further than we have dared before. They returned to the surface cloaked in human form, the cold night air alive with the stench of decay and smoke. Fires burned in rusted barrels, casting ghostly shadows across walls defaced with desperate warnings and cruel symbols. The human city was a labyrinth of ruin, its narrow streets suffused with a palpable sense of dread. Every corner seemed to whisper a threat just out of sight, the unseen horrors that lurked behind cracked windows and broken doors. They found him sitting alone. A man thin, ragged, yet defiant, clutched a battered rifle in his hands. His name, they would later learn, was David. His eyes, sharp with exhaustion, reflected flickers of the dying fire before him. He did not look up as they approached, but his voice broke the stillness with quiet authority. Careful where you walk. Not everything hiding in the dark is afraid of it. Varkson studied him, intrigued by the calm tone, the precise choice of words. And are you afraid of it? David chuckled, a low, humorless sound. Afraid of it. I am the darksome nights. Zoc shifted uncomfortably, his human guise betraying a flicker of tension. What do you fight against? David's eyes, weary but unyielding, lifted to meet theirs. Everything that dares to take away what little I have left. The ones who want to break us because it's easy. The monsters wearing faces like yours and mine. And the real monsters. Varkson asked softly. David's smile was grim, almost pitying. There's no such thing as real monsters. Just people who forget what it means to be human. The words struck Varkson like a physical blow. He stared into David's eyes, searching for weakness, but found only a strength forged from something far more dangerous than fury, hope sharpened by suffering. This was not the blind resilience of instinct, but the cold fire of determination, the unbreakable will of a creature that refused to surrender even to its own nightmares. You fight, knowing the cost, Varkson said, knowing it may destroy you. David nodded, the lines on his face deepening. It already has. The trick is to keep going after there's nothing left inside. Silence settled around them, heavy with meaning. Zoc felt the weight press against his chest, a suffocating realization of the truth beneath the human's words. They had not encountered chaos without purpose. They had found a species that turned suffering into resolve, fear into fuel. Humanity was not defined by its horrors. It thrived within them. A distant sound shattered the quiet. Footsteps, deliberate and menacing, echoed from the shadows. Varkson and Zoc turned, their senses alert, but David remained still, his grip tightening on the rifle. He did not move as figures emerged, 3 men with hungry eyes and sharp blades. Their intentions were clear long before the first one spoke. "Looks like you've got something worth taking," the largest one sneered, gesturing with a knife. David sighed, his expression weary but unafraid. "You'd best turn around." The man laughed, a cruel, hollow sound. "And why's that?" "You're all alone." David's voice was calm as death itself. "Because I'm not afraid of dying." The man lunged, swift and brutal. But David was faster. The rifle barked once, twice, and the shadows erupted with violence. When the smoke cleared, 2 lay still. The third, trembling, backed away with eyes wide, hands raised. David stood slowly, his breathing even, the firelight casting his silhouette like a specter against the wall. He stared at the survivor, unblinking. "Go. Tell the others what you saw." The man fled, his footsteps vanishing into the night. Varkson watched, every movement etched into his memory, every nuance a revelation. "You let him live," he observed. David nodded, lowering his weapon. "Fear spreads faster than blood. He'll do more damage running than dying." "You understand fear better than any creature we've encountered," Varkson said. "Yet you do not succumb to it." David's eyes darkened, his voice quiet but sharp as a blade. "I don't use fear. I use the truth. That's the real weapon. Fear fades when the sun rises. Truth burns forever." Varkson remained silent, his mind racing. The man before him was no anomaly. He was a reflection of the collective soul of humanity, resilient, adaptive, and impossibly dangerous. He had seen death, faced it, and emerged not unscathed but unbroken. As they prepared to leave, Varkson met David's gaze one last time. "What is the most terrifying thing about your kind?" David's answer came without hesitation, that we can see the darkness inside us, and we still choose to fight it. Back aboard the ship, as Earth faded into the distance, Varkson stood in contemplation. Zoc broke the silence, his voice hollow. "What did we learn?" Varkson's many eyes reflected the swirling void beyond. That humans are not monsters. They are far worse. They know what they are, and they keep going. The stars stretched endlessly before them, cold and uncaring. Behind them, Earth spun in its quiet, terrifying orbit, and Varkson understood they had witnessed something no logic could conquer, a species bound to chaos, yet unafraid to dream.